Our next guest has spent nearly a decade working undercover in the CIA, hunting the world's most dangerous terrorists.
Now she's stepping out of the shadows and revealing her true identity in her new book, Life Undercover, Coming of Age in the CIA. So please welcome to the show, author Amaryllis Fox. So you were actually recruited by the CIA when you were a graduate student in Georgetown University, at Georgetown University in Washington. So what made you decide to join the agency?
You know, I'd been affected by terrorism a great deal as a child. My dear friend Laura in third grade was on the flight that went down over Lockerbie, Scotland with her whole family. And so then when 9/11 happened, I was just finishing up university. It brought all of those memories back. And my dad had always told me, when something scares you, you have to understand it or it will overwhelm you. So I set out to do my graduate work in predicting terror activity and met the CIA officer in residence there at Georgetown School of Foreign Service.
Wow. So you joined the CIA, and in doing so, Amaryllis, you've got to hide what you're doing, your job, from everybody that you love. So your parents don't know, other family members, friends. They think that you're an art consultant with global contacts. That's who they think you are. What impact did going undercover have on your personal relationships?
It's really lonely. I mean, it's a lonely way to spend your 20s, and that's part of the commitment and part of the sacrifice that goes into it. But it's very important to protect your work for yourself and for the people that you're working with. I always say that relationship coaches say that the way to make relationships succeed is to communicate, and that's hard enough for all of us, but it's particularly difficult when you're living undercover. And there was a lot of subtext communication and things that went unsaid, which made the family side of it very hard.
It's fascinating. One of the most powerful scenes in your book is when you meet with representatives from three extremist groups. So they were all affiliated with Al-Qaeda or the Taliban, and your job was to persuade them to stop a bombing that was to take place in Pakistan. So tell us about how you managed to stop these leaders from executing this bombing.
Well, the reason I include that interaction is because it's such a good illustration of stepping away from our antagonistic fighter hats and engaging with one another as humans. Because in that case, we were on such opposing sides of an issue that was just getting tighter and tighter, and there was no room for negotiation. Being able to step back and talk as two parents of kids who are both suffering from asthma, connecting on traditional remedies, just gave us this glimmer of each other's common humanity for a minute, so that when we returned to this area of disagreement, it could be with a little bit more dialogue, a little bit more mutual respect. And it sounds like old-fashioned advice, but time and again in the field, I found that communicating after establishing that common humanity becomes a lot easier.
So you're doing your job, and you're doing it well, but I can only think that fear has got to be a constant. It's something that you live with, knowing that each day could very well be your last. How do you handle that?
I think you really have to feel it. You know, fear is a primal response, and it's there for a reason. It really underscores the stakes, both for you and your family, but also for all the other mothers and their kids that are out there, and gives you a sense of purpose, or at least it did for me.
You actually gave birth to your daughter Zoe when you were living undercover in Shanghai. And so you're meeting with informants and arms dealers. And at one point, or maybe in several points, you actually bring your daughter with you, strapped to you in a holder. So talk about what it was like to do your job with your daughter with you.
Well, you know, I never took her to an active war zone, but there was a lot of travel. And every time, like any working mom, it was a decision as to whether to leave my little one at home or bring her with me. And we were living in a hostile country, so that wasn't always the simplest trade-off and decision. But I also found that she really was this little embodiment of everything that I hoped for the future and for our world. And it was a really powerful totem for me of the peace that we were fighting for.
So you're in the CIA, but you're a woman. in the CIA, and that's a very different situation altogether. And you say in your book that you feared for your job, that you were very much part of this kind of old boys network where people had fought wars together, and there you were trying to navigate this world and kind of move up the ranks in this male-dominated world. Tell us about that and experiencing that.
There were definitely moments, especially at the beginning of my career, where there was a lot of sexism, a lot of condescension. I got a text on an operational cell phone from a leader at the agency who I'd never met, who said he'd seen me around, and I really raised his flagpole.
Oh, man.
So, incredibly degrading stuff, way worse than that. But over the course of the time that I was there, I really noticed this evolution where there was a recognition that some of the more senior women were rising in the ranks, and that the traits that we often associate with feminine problem solving, emotional intelligence, intuition, multitasking, are critical to the human intelligence collector. And these images that we see in the movies of like thigh-high boots and kicking doors down, or just no women at all, are supposed to be empowering, but they actually really undermine that substantive skill set that women really bring to the work. And we're seeing now with the leaders of the intelligence community increasingly being women.
You use the word addictive to describe your job, but it was even more than that. It was a job that really impacted your entire life. You say it became a pantomime of normalcy, and yet you eventually stepped away. So what was it that made you step away and decide to leave the CIA?
I think in many ways it was my daughter. I got to the point where I felt that I had done all the work I was meant to do there, and that these same tools that I had learned around being able to listen to the people that we fear and create dialogue where it wasn't before could be used in other parts of our own community around, former gang members or those who are emerging from prison and want to make amends to survivors of their crimes. So I moved into being able to take these skills and use them in other ways.
Your book is so informative, but it details, things like spying techniques and training and secret meetings. So wanting to know how your book was altered to protect this kind of sensitive information from being disclosed.
It's really important, and it's a long process. In my case, it was a little easier, in part because I was kind of the last generation of the Cold War spycraft. I mean, I started after 9/11, but my teachers were all Cold Warriors, and we were still doing the chalk marks on corners. That now it's a very different set of tradecraft because you have facial recognition and biometrics and a whole different range of problems to solve. But also, this was a coming of age story. It is about how my views on listening to our adversaries and solving the problems of the war on terror evolved over the course of this career as a wife and as a mother.
Since you left the CIA, you actually got married to Bobby Kennedy III, and you also gave birth earlier this year to a baby girl who you named Bobby. So congratulations on that. More congratulations are in order because your book is being turned into a TV series starring Oscar winner Brie Larson. So talk about what life is like for you now.
Well, I'm so happy to put this story in Brie's hands because she's really a powerhouse, a warrior on behalf of women's rights, and also just a force of nature as an entertainment leader. But outside of that, my life is quiet and happy, and I'm so happy to be able to spend time with my family and my little ones in a raw, honest way. I have this tattoo actually on the inside of my wrist that says, "This too shall pass," which I think people often say in times of trial, but for me, it's there as a reminder when I read to my girls that, life moves quickly and can be very fleeting. There are a lot of dangers out there, and it reminds me to treasure every moment.
Well, Amaryllis, thank you so much. What a remarkable story, remarkable life. The book is called Life Undercover, and guess what? Everyone in our studio audience, you're going home with your own copy today.